Hello, folks. Welcome to the 35th episode of Al's Joint. We have a lot to discuss. There's a lot coming out of Washington, D.C. as this Trump administration continues to destroy our Constitution. I'll be joined today by my co-host, Dennis Painter. So as we pay homage to Smokey Robinson and the Miracles and Satisfaction, let's take the gloves off and let's get at it. Hello, Brother Painter. Here we are, another episode, another week of craziness out of this administration.
Here we are. As you said, every week we have to take the gloves off and tell the truth.
Where do we start with all this madness? ICE is, their overreach is starting to get ridiculous. They're starting to show who they truly are and what they're truly trying to do. They're starting to act just like the Gestapo did in Nazi Germany. We have violence towards American citizens who are not immigrants. We have immigrants dying and in custody at an alarming rate. That's what the Gestapo did. That's how they started. And we all know how that ended.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is, and this comes as part of Trump telling the generals, they spit, you hit, they're going to get more violent, because that's what he's saying. Instead of using the system and giving people their rights, you become more violent. And one of the things that happened in Portland over the last week was the rescue squad was called to haul a person out, and ICE blocked them. The patient was in there, but then two other people, the driver and then the other person was with the patient in the rear, and ICE blocked their exit. Finally, what the guy did is they wouldn't get out of the way. He put the emergency vehicle in park and took his foot off the brake, and it lunged forward just a couple inches. Well, ICE started screaming at him, got in the window and said, "I'm gonna shoot you." This kind of stuff, blocking an emergency vehicle is bad enough, but then screaming at citizens that you're going to shoot them that clearly has no weapon. They have no weapon whatsoever. The vehicle's in park. They know it. They approach the vehicle, and at least 10 of them blocked this emergency vehicle from what I read. And there was about 50 ICE agents around. So it's going to get more and more aggressive. I had a conversation about what Trump said about they spit, you hit. It isn't about enforcing the law. I mean, if you break the law, you should be arrested. You shouldn't be beat up. You shouldn't be assaulted by government agencies. Okay? You get arrested, you go through the system. If you break the law, that's the way it works. And Trump's given the go-ahead is no. Let's don't give them the right to defend themselves. Let's don't give them the right to their day in court. Let's beat the crap out of them.
Well, as we talked on the last podcast where we filmed in Portland, Oregon, I was there for 4 full days. And I want folks to know, do your own research. I'm going to explain Portland like this. If you're looking for excitement, don't go to Portland. Portland has to be one of the most calm, laid back, boringest cities I've been in, and I've been in literally hundreds of cities in the United States. We looked everywhere to see if there was any sign of civil unrest or crime any different in any other city. And other than what they call property vandalism, if somebody's sleeping in your yard or on your porch, a homeless person, and you report that, that's an incident of a crime, right? Even if it's a misdemeanor. Those are the things that are happening in Portland. Portland is projected to reach maybe 40 homicides this year in a city with 800,000 people. That, to me, that doesn't show anything that's needed there other than the police they currently have working. They're doing a good job. I don't understand this, the statement that Trump came out that every day for years and years. I have no clue what he's talking about. I thought I was in the wrong Portland. Maybe I should have went to Portland, Maine. I don't know. It definitely wasn't Portland, Oregon.
Well, I think that what you saw is what the people in Portland see, and certainly what people on city council of Portland see. And last night, the city council of Portland approved a pair of proposals that seek to oppose or limit federal targeting of Portland. And that's what's going on. I mean, they've targeted it for a reason. And it's not because of crime, it's because, the midterm elections, and they want to intimidate people. They called Trump's action of targeting Portland as, quote, aggressive federal overreach. And that's going on in every city, that he's put troops in. It is overreach. The proposals that were passed by a 12-0 vote, calls for the city to, one, create a rapid response plan for immigration raids, okay? And the second, which is, it's really caught my attention and bothers me, because this has been a concern I've had ever since, they started hauling people away and we don't know where they're taking them, is investigating potential crimes by impersonators of ICE agents. Now, all you gotta do is cover your face and grab an automatic weapon and claim you're from ICE. Well, how do you know? The impersonation of ICE agent is real. The threat that it could potentially be to citizens is real. So that really caught my attention, and it really should catch America's attention.
And we should note that these ICE agents aren't soldiers. They don't receive a fraction of the training that soldiers do. They're not National Guardsmen. They don't receive a fraction of the training National Guardsmen do. They're not even elite police officers. And when I use that word, I use it intentionally, elite police officers, because there are some police forces that have these little rinky-dink recruits that they have on the force, right? But the elite police officers in the larger cities have 10 times the training that these ICE agents have. So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at every person who was ever a Freeman or a KKK member, or the folks who could never pass any test to get in the military or on a police force. They're running against these ICE jobs. So you got all these wannabe folks, and that leads to serious trouble down the road. There's no way around it.
There's none. I look at it from the point of view, every person who despises another race or people of color, they can apply for a job and get one. And there's, in my opinion, there's no training except for how do you shoot a weapon and how do you corral people and haul them off. Now, police are supposed to be trained to de-escalate a situation. Troops that are sent into our cities, which they did in LA during the fires and demonstrations years ago, were sent there to de-escalate. They were trained to de-escalate. ICE agents are not trained to do that. And what they're doing is escalating the violence. And I think that's what Trump wants. He has to have violence to declare martial law. He has to have it. And I think that's what he's pushing for. When at Charlie Kirk's funeral, he said, they're my enemies. That's what he's pushing for. He's going to have war with his enemies, which is, by population, at least half of this country.
I want to make sure I send a warning out and a reminder out to the tens of millions of folks who are going to participate in the No Kings rallies this weekend. Don't fall for the bait. If you notice, they're trying to rev up the far right-wing nuts by saying these are anti-American rallies. You're talking about tens of millions of folks and no incidents in the last No Kings rally. So where they got those adjectives from, we'll never know, but that's their MO. Paint the other side as anti-American and hope that some nut, God forbid, decides to buy into that.
Well, it's not even that, Al. Labor history, when people had protests and struggles just to establish fair rights for the working class, and had demonstrations. I don't know whether people know about the Pinkertons or not, but they were, goons hired by companies and guards, and what they would do was attend the rallies and throw bombs and then arrest the labor leaders, and some of them got hung. And so it's an opportunity for Trump to set up a situation of violence and declare martial law. And I think that, and I've already talked to people, I'm going to be there. I happen to carry a pocket knife with me just for utility purposes. And I've told them, I'm taking that pocket knife and I'm leaving it at home because somebody's going to consider that as a weapon. And their discussions I've had with people is, first off, one of them was, what is No King's Day? And then they want to claim that, well, somebody's financing the pallets of bricks that's being brought in. Well, that's not happening. I've been, and you have too. We've been to hundreds of rallies. There's been no bricks. And I explained to them, I've been to them. There's been no violence. The intent is not to have violence. Who does it serve? And this is something you said last week. Who does it serve to have violence? It doesn't serve, those opposed to Trump. It doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve our country, but it does serve Trump's agenda. And that's to take his country over and be king.
Well put. Which leads us to our next subject, the young Nazi Republicans and their chat room that was leaked out to the public, where we had these Republicans making racial comments, calling people of color monkeys, a lot of anti-Islamic rhetoric, along with anti-Semitic rhetoric, which was strewn throughout the whole chat. This wasn't like isolated incidents. It was continuous and it was serious. And we had J.D. Vance come on and defend these young kids and what they were saying, and saying they try to divert our attention back to, I believe, the guy running for Attorney General in New Jersey.
It's Virginia.
Find out that the average age that these young Republican parties is 30 years old. That's the average age. If you look at the average age of the top 8 or 9 folks who were commenting, that average age jumps to 35. So these weren't no young kids. These were grown-ass people. And to give you some context, AOC in her second term sitting in Congress is 33 years old, younger than the folks who are making these comments. Anna Paulina Luna, another congresswoman, 33 years old. Maxwell Frost, 26 years old. Can you imagine if one of them has said any one of those, not multiple times, not over the course of weeks and months and years, one statement, would you think J.D. Vance would have said, Maxwell Frost is a kid, AOC is a kid, Congresswoman Luna is a kid? No, they would have attacked them right away. For him to use that is misleading. Really, he's lying again. And he had people really thinking, oh, there's some kid in a chat room. No, these were grown-ass adults who are eligible to run for Congress, and a couple of them are even eligible to run for the president of the United States.
What makes it clear to me, Al, they changed the white hat and mask of the KKK for the red hat, what they've done. And, and people, I don't think people really think down the road, okay, now it's immigrants. Well, you think they're going to stop at that? No. What's the next group of people of color? They're not going to stop until they have attacked every person that's different, okay, than them. They perceive. They want white supremacy. That 35% base that you keep talking about that will never change, they're racist, in my opinion. They will never change their mind, in my opinion. And they got told what they wanted to hear. All that stuff about the young Republicans, it was obscene and racist. One of them called for the killing of an opponent.
They even called for the killing of one of their own.
Yep. And so you take a look at this. This is the Republican Party behind closed doors. And when I say that, that's the Republican Party that's currently in place. That's the Republican Party that's being trained, okay? And you have people hiding behind words like, I'm a conservative. or I'm religious and I believe this or that. They're hiding the truth. Look, if you're racist, just stand up and say, look, I'm racist. Have the backbone to stand up and say, yeah, I took the hood off. Okay, now let's take the full mask off, because that's really what they're saying. They're using the red hat to say, I believe in making America great, but they really are using that hat to say, I want to make America all white supremacy.
Oh, I tell you,
I'm not get on a rant, but this stuff, people.
it puts you in a position where you almost have to rant, right? You have to, you got to rail against what's happening. It's getting to the point where these grown ass people are targeting these 18, 19, 20-year-olds and bringing them into the Republican Party so they can feed them all that vitriol. In one way, it's shocking. In other ways, we've come to expect it. But should we? Should we have to say that's the norm and it's okay? So we let J.D. Vance be able to stand up and say, don't see me, the gun in my right hand. I want you to concentrate on a cupcake I have in my left hand.
Yeah, well, I put the knife in your back at the same time. He's got 3 arms, okay? I lost all respect for J.D. Vance, and I had this discussion this week with an individual when there was the interview with the President Zelensky from Ukraine and Trump. He challenged the truth and called Trump's lies the truth. And I lost every bit of respect for J.D. Vance. Didn't have much for him to start with, but I lost every bit of it then.
Well, to be honest with you, when I see a man that wears mascara and fake eyelashes, I don't really have much respect for you then. I think now they're probably tattooed on. I can't see them getting up every morning and continually put on eyeliner. So I'm assuming he had them tattooed on. That with the Ozempic that he's taking to lose weight, to keep his weight down, I've never had respect for him. I never understood why they picked him. I think I have an idea. We'll probably talk a little later when we give an update on Epstein. But I wanted to touch on the whole Super Bowl halftime show fiasco, where the NFL chose to bring in Bad Bunny, Puerto Rican sensation, actually one of the biggest stars in the world. I didn't know much about him until recently, but actually I heard a little about him during the late part of the presidential campaign when he came out to defend the fact that Trump and his folks were denigrating Puerto Rico. But before then, I didn't know much about him. But there's been a big uproar from MAGA because they don't want a Spanish-speaking or a Spanish singer doing a Super Bowl halftime show. However, we've had many folks saying that we should have an American, right? A lot of MAGA folks don't realize that Puerto Rico is part of America. And I can understand
it's
why.
crazy.
Right, I know. I understand why, though, because smart people hate Donald Trump. Just asking.
I don't mean to laugh, but I mean, there are people out there that do not realize that Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and it blows my mind. And it's like, okay, so he's speaking Spanish. I'm thinking, you need to travel outside your county line, okay?
Yes.
Okay, and need to see there are different cultures out there. I want to say about this, look, I'm not a football fan, not because I hate football. I've just never got interested in football. And I didn't know anything about Bad Bunny. I am old or whatever the hell you want to call me, aged well, like good whiskey, but I didn't know anything about him. But it's entertainment. Football is entertainment, nothing but entertainment. I don't care what sport it is, basketball, baseball, whatever. It is entertainment, folks. Okay? And Bad Bunny is entertainment. Now, he's going to make the NFL a lot of money. And what I saw was MAGA's upset is he's going to be speaking Spanish. Well, guess what? There's going to be a lot more people enthused about that. And NFL is going to make a lot more money because the NFL is a business than following Trump's orders. Okay. Now, I want to read a couple things, and this is disturbing. Okay. This is in response to NFL announcing that Bad Bunny was going to do the 30-minute concert. Trump's Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced that, quote, ICE agents will be all over the 2026 Super Bowl. Now that's an absolute threat. And she also said, and I'm quoting, the NFL will not be able to sleep at night over its decision to choose Bad Bunny as the halftime performer. Now, what's that mean? Does that mean you're going to kill me? You know, is that going to mean you're going to raid my office? Does that mean you're going to shut down my stadium? What's that mean? You can't sleep at night. It's a direct threat. And that's the administration that we're dealing with. And I don't care whether it's Trump, whether it's Kristi Noem, or whether it's Pam Bondi, whether it's JD Vance, that's who it's dealing with. You don't do what we say, we'll threaten you. Okay. And that's been Trump's MO all his life because he had billions given to him by his father. And he was able to intimidate and bully people. And that's what they're using now is bullying. So I think it's crazy. It's entertainment. Who gives a crap? You don't want to watch it, don't watch it.
What I want to let the MAGA folks know. For every MAGA person who doesn't watch the Super Bowl, there's going to be 100 Latin American folks watching the Super Bowl. So if you think you're going to intimidate the NFL has made a business decision. They moved to Europe. They have games played in Europe every year. The Steelers played in Ireland this year because they wanted that audience. And guess what? They're getting it. Now they're targeting South America, the billion people that are in South America. So if you think 40,000 folks tuning out of the Super Bowl in the United States is going to affect them, you're kidding yourself. Now, they may end up turning off the halftime show, but that's, like you said, that's your prerogative. Don't watch it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But it's a business decision. And I'll tell folks just what JD Vance said about the young 30-year-olds that were making racist remarks. Grow up. You're right. It's a sport. That's all it is. It's a sport. All these things going on. You got a pedophile in the White House, and you're worried about the Super Bowl halftime show, but you're not worried about all the young girls and boys that were raped by these folks that are currently in this administration. Give me a break.
You know, Al, being on this podcast has made me do a lot of internal search and a lot of internal thinking about the country as a whole and looking at what's happening. And the very fact that we have a drug problem in this country, okay, but we're using troops to move people out of this country that are working and paying taxes, but we're doing nothing about the drug problem in the country. We could use those National Guard troops, you know, in the cities to run down where is the drugs coming from. I mean, that's a real problem. And you talk about crime is based off of a number of things, but mostly it's lack of money or poverty and drugs. And Trump has decided not to do that. He's not going to go use the troops to search and get the Epstein files because he's in them. You know, we're not really addressing true crime. What's going to affect you more? All right. A demonstration, which I'll be at, that's one day, or your loss of constitutional rights. What's going to affect you the most? What's going to affect you the most? The right to have free elections or having guards with semi-automatic weapons checking your ID before you go in to vote?
Or before you go into the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. You know, and they're going to have ICE agents doing that. This is when the statement was made by Portland that this is overreach. And you've seen it, I've seen it. You know, people with authority, people with power get arrogant and they overplay. And when they overplay, then there's a backlash. They overplay in what they are doing. And as long as the people stand up in this country and keep saying, we're not taking it, keep saying, we want real law and order, we want the Epstein files. You bombing boats down in Venezuela and threatening to go to war with Venezuela is not going to distract us. You bombed those people, you had shown any effort or any attempt to find out whether or not they were fishermen or whether there was true drugs on that boat or what direction that boat was going. And the story was made. You know,
Well, don't
so
forget that they were small ass boats. There's millions of pounds of drugs coming to this country every year, and you bombed a rowboat. And
yeah, I
you
know.
think
And I look at it, you know, but the people wearing the red hats, crying law and order about the immigrants really don't give a shit about law and order if they're not also saying go after the Epstein files. If they're not saying go after the people that violated those underage girls, they don't care about law and order. And they care about feeling good about themselves, and they don't really care about anything else.
I want to say one thing on the Super Bowl before we move on. Very seldom, and it's crazy because no matter who's been on the halftime show, I usually miss some of it. I'm gonna be honest, because normally by halftime I'm normally entertaining. I'm going to get more food. I'm going to get some soda. I'm running around. I'm looking a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm not affixed to it. It's just because most of the artists that are on there, you've seen them before. So to me, it's not like it's an artist you haven't seen and you haven't seen them all the videos. We grew up in the video age where you can watch audio. You back when we were kids, you couldn't. Somebody was on TV, you had to watch them because you weren't going to see them again. You can watch the halftime show after the game by yourself in peace, right? This halftime show, I'm going to watch from beginning to end just because they told me we shouldn't. I'm gonna watch I'm gonna know who Bad Bunny's songs are, what his moves are, and everything else by the end of the halftime show.
Now, I'm not a football fan, but now you just convinced me I'm going to watch the halftime show.
Yeah,
I may
you
not
may
watch
not even
the
watch
game.
the game. Just turn on the halftime show. See that's what
watch
they've
the
done.
halftime show.
And everybody in every Spanish-speaking country in the world is going to watch the halftime show just because they know that the MAGA folks aren't, right?
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. And this is the point that MAGA has not figured out. They're outnumbered. They're outnumbered in the world. They're outnumbered in this country. And like I said, this is not true about all Republicans. Okay, there's good people. They're conservative. They have a right to their view. And the discussion I had this past week is, look, you and I had a discussion about the podcast. I said, you and I are not calling for people to abandon their party. What we're calling for is that our constitutional rights be instilled and be followed, that the Epstein files be made public, and there be true law and order. Okay, that's what we're really after. That I had to take up for Trump. I have to confess, I had to take up for him. Somebody was telling me that he was acting like a maniac, and I had to take up for him and say he's not acting. So but I had to do the 10 o'clock Al joke.
I got you. So I want to make sure we never have an episode where we don't give an update on Epstein.
Yep.
And remind folks why all this madness is happening. But I was doing some research and it's cloudy. You may want to spend some time researching this week with me, but people believe that J.D. Vance is in the Epstein files. The scary part is he wasn't old enough to be a perpetrator.
Yeah.
He would have been old enough to be a victim. I want to try to do some more research, and I'm asking folks out there to do your own research. Because if he's in the Epstein files and Trump is in the Epstein files, the dots start to get connected.
Right.
And that's scary. And if the first lady, Melania, is in the Epstein file, we got this big vicious circle. And folks going to look at themselves and say, what the hell was I thinking when I let these folks manipulate me? And I'm not talking about the 33% of MAGA. They don't care. But for the other folks who helped get him over the hump, those folks got to live with what they did.
Well, and I think that there is no shame in realizing that you made a mistake. I mean, I've made mistakes in my life, okay? I had to come to terms with them, all right? The shame comes when you recognize you made a mistake and you don't do something to correct it. I think there's where the real shame's at. And in terms of all of the Epstein files, I read just this last week that Melania and Trump had their first encounter, okay, without clothes on Epstein's plane, according to Epstein. So now, how old was she? I don't know.
Well, I'll definitely be doing some more research. I want to know who was there. I want to know when they're going to release the files. People need to understand when you go through everything they've done to block that information from coming out, how damaging does it have to be for them? Think about it. They're risking everything to withhold these files so you know how damaging they are. The more folks who are in that circle that are currently in play here, and Pam Bondi, she was down in Florida working for the Justice Department down there. She helped hide this stuff, right? All this stuff came out. I want to know how all those folks are entwined and why these young girls and boys were molested and there's nothing that was done about it.
I want people to know that every politician, regardless of party, that's blocking the release of those Epstein files is aiding and abetting pedophiles. They are as guilty as the person who committed the crime because they too are committing a crime.
If you ask me, they're more guilty. The reason I say that is because the pedophiles are guilty, but I have to believe that they're sick individuals. But the folks who hide it, they took the time to figure out that it was in their best interest to hide it and cover it up. So they're even worse than the sicko. We got to deal with the sick folks. We got to deal with the criminals. If they are not sick, whether they are or not, they got to pay for the crime they committed, right? But the folks who are able to say, I have a chance to stop it, if this person is a sicko and he's out there molesting little girls and little boys, and I know about it, I have a chance to keep future little girls and little boys safe, and I decide not to do it, I think you're more guilty than the perpetrator.
Or simply, certainly as guilty because we're not stopping the crime. It's being encouraged by hiding the Epstein files.
Agreed. On that note, it brings us to the end of another episode. I want to thank you for taking the time to do the research and contribute to this podcast. And until next week, we will, of course, get a chance to discuss the No Kings rally and the participation, whatever other craziness comes out of Washington, D.C. I want to thank folks for watching this episode. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. It's free. And don't forget to leave your comments below. I want to know what you're thinking. Unless you're a far right-wing MAGA nut, and I don't give a damn what you're thinking. So until next Friday, let's keep the fight up and keep this country out of the hands of those far right-wing nuts. Peace.
This episode of Al's Journey is brought to you by Jackpack.